The security footage would later become the most expensive piece of evidence in legal history. 23 seconds of grainy surveillance showing a woman in a 50-0 gown walking away from the richest man on Earth, an opened envelope clutched in her perfectly manicured hands. But to understand how that moment would trigger the collapse of empires, we need to rewind to when Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sanchez still believed their fairy tale was just beginning. The wedding had been flawless. Maui's black volcanic shores provided the perfect backdrop as orchids from Thailand swayed in Pacific breezes, and a string quartet's melodies floated above crashing waves. Hollywood royalty mingled with Silicon Valley titans, while old-world aristocracy sipped champagne under fairy lights. The guest list read like a Davos seating chart, every invitation a strategic chess move in the global power game. Jeff Bezos stood at the altar, looking every inch the conquering founder who had won at everything, including love. Lauren Sanchez, radiant in her custom Valentino gown, glided toward him like a newly crowned queen approaching her throne. The photos flooded social feeds. Headlines gushed with superlatives, and the world collectively sighed this was the apex of billionaire romance. But fairy tales, even billion-dollar ones, don't always survive the honeymoon. The first cracks appeared not with tabloid scandals or explosive fights, but with something far more insidious: the slow, methodical tightening of financial control. For Lauren, luxury hadn't been a weekend indulgence. It was the rhythm of her existence. Rodeo Drive clerks knew her coffee order. Fashion houses reserved front-row seats before she asked. And spontaneous trips to Paris were calendar items, not exceptions. That velocity of lifestyle, amplified by social media's relentless gaze, had become its own narrative, the billionaire bride with an appetite for spectacle. According to sources close to Bezos, that narrative began to feel less like celebration and more like liability. The transformation was gradual but unmistakable. Jeff's world shifted in ways almost invisible from the outside. Fewer accepted invitations, rerouted spending access, quietly implemented boundaries. For most couples, these would be minor adjustments. For a woman accustomed to living at maximum volume, they felt seismic. The breaking point came during what should have been a routine evening. A high-stakes dinner in Malibu with Hollywood's power brokers and tech's kingmakers ended with polite smiles for cameras and Arctic silence during the ride home. Inside their candlelit Beverly Hills sanctuary, Lauren demanded answers. Why were transactions being blocked? Why the public humiliation? Bezos's response was characteristically measured but ironclad. There would be boundaries now. Then came the envelope. Then came the silence that would echo across boardrooms, social circles, and eventually courtrooms around the world. What happened next wasn't just about money, it was about power, perception, and the price of control in a marriage where every decision carried billion-dollar consequences. The envelope contained more than financial restrictions. It held the blueprint for Lauren's carefully orchestrated downfall. According to insiders who would later testify in closed depositions, the document outlined a restructuring of her personal spending allowance from unlimited access to a monthly allocation that, while enormous by normal standards, represented a public leash around the neck of Amazon's queen. For the outside world, this seemed laughable. Bezos's fortune dwarfed entire national budgets. But at this stratospheric level of wealth, money becomes something far more complex than currency. It's leverage, status, and most importantly, control. The household atmosphere shifted instantly after the envelope's delivery. Staff whispered about raised voices echoing through marble hallways, about Bezos retreating to his private study filled with rare books and strategic silence, while Lauren locked herself in the guest wing's master suite. Two separate kingdoms within one mansion, each pulsing with barely contained fury. What began as a financial boundary quickly spiraled into an identity crisis. Friends close to Lauren insist she had always taken fierce pride in her independence. Long before Bezos entered her orbit, she had built a respected media career, covering breaking news from helicopter cockpits high above Los Angeles, piloting aircraft through the city's notorious airspace, and carving out her own place in the entertainment industry's ruthless social hierarchy. She wasn't some nameless socialite plucked from obscurity. She was a woman who had earned her stripes in cutthroat industries where reputation and competence mattered more than connections. Her journalism credentials were solid, her pilot skills legendary among aviation circles, and her social navigation through Hollywood's treacherous waters had been masterful. When the man she had just married handed her what amounted to a corporate memo on personal conduct, complete with spending categories and approval processes, it wasn't just insulting, it was devastating. The document treated her like a subsidiary rather than a partner, a cost center rather than an equal. And that devastation leaked quickly into their elite social ecosystem, spreading through interconnected networks of wealth and influence with viral intensity. From Malibu beach clubs where membership cost more than most homes, to Manhattan penthouses overlooking Central Park, whispers multiplied exponentially. Dinner parties at estates in the Hamptons became intelligence-gathering operations, where guests passed every detail for clues about the couple's stability. The whispers grew more sophisticated as the weeks passed. Private equity titans shared concerned observations at exclusive golf tournaments. Venture capital partners exchanged knowing glances at Silicon Valley fundraising events. European aristocrats gossiped in multiple languages at charity auction galas across the continent. Was this a temporary adjustment period as two alpha personalities learned to coexist, or the first visible fracture in a marriage that hadn't even completed its inaugural year? The speculation grew more intense with each passing day, feeding on itself in the way that only elite gossip can. The ripple effects began manifesting in unexpected ways. Art dealers, who had courted Lauren's patronage, suddenly found their calls unreturned. Luxury travel consultants watched seven-figure bookings vanish without explanation. Personal shoppers at the world's most exclusive boutiques reported credit card declines that sent shockwaves through the industry's tightly connected network. Even charitable organizations felt the chill. Lauren had been developing her own philanthropic identity, separate from Jeff's environmental focus, concentrating on education initiatives and women's empowerment programs. Suddenly, meetings with non-profit executives were being postponed indefinitely, and pledges that seemed guaranteed were placed under review. The media responded with predatory precision, honed by decades of covering celebrity implosions. Publications that had breathlessly covered their Maui vows with fairy tale language pivoted overnight to probe deeper questions about control, financial boundaries, and the true dynamics of power within one of the world's most scrutinized relationships. Entertainment Tonight ran segments analyzing their body language at recent red carpet appearances. Business publications like Forbes and Fortune began questioning whether personal turmoil might affect Bezos's focus on Amazon's strategic initiatives or Blue Origin's ambitious space exploration timeline. The Wall Street Journal assigned investigative reporters to examine the potential market implications of a high-profile divorce involving the world's largest fortune. Social media exploded with a mixture of schadenfreude and genuine fascination. The hashtag #BezosGate began trending globally within hours, spawning thousands of memes comparing Lauren's shopping expeditions to corporate acquisitions, while others mocked the world's richest man for implementing a household budget. Twitter threads dissected their recent public appearances frame by frame, searching for micro-expressions that might confirm the growing rumors of discord. Instagram accounts dedicated to tracking celebrity relationships saw their follow accounts explode as users hungry for insider information passed everything from jewelry choices to restaurant selections for hidden meanings. TikTok creators produced viral videos analyzing the couple's fashion coordination at events, claiming that mismatched color schemes revealed underlying tension. Even LinkedIn buzzed with professional speculation about how marital instability might impact Amazon's stock price or Blue Origin's government contracts. Industry analysts began factoring relationship stability into their quarterly reports, treating personal drama as a legitimate business risk. But beyond digital mockery and speculation, their elite social network began to fracture along predictable but devastating lines. Invitations to exclusive gatherings grew increasingly selective as high-powered couples calculated the reputational risks of association with a potentially imploding marriage. The annual Hamptons social circuit, traditionally Lauren's domain where she had cultivated relationships with media moguls, fashion industry leaders, and entertainment executives, suddenly felt hostile. Conversations ceased when she entered rooms, phone calls went unreturned, social media posts featuring her were quietly deleted by supposed friends eager to distance themselves from potential controversy. In circles where proximity to power equals social currency, even peripheral involvement in marital conflict could prove costly. The same people who had competed for seats at their wedding reception now maintained careful distance, unwilling to risk being collateral damage in what appeared to be an escalating public spectacle. Country club memberships that had once been sources of social validation became arenas of subtle humiliation. Golf partners made excuses to avoid foursomes. Tennis matches were mysteriously rescheduled. Even charitable board positions, once eagerly offered to secure her participation and financial contributions, were quietly rescinded with vague explanations about restructuring and changing priorities. The attempted reconciliations were as strategic as they were ultimately futile. Mutual friends arranged carefully orchestrated weekends in Aspen and Martha's Vineyard. Neutral territories where cooler heads might theoretically prevail. Private jets carried the couple to exclusive resorts where discretion was guaranteed and paparazzi presence minimized. Celebrity relationship counselors who charged thousands per hour were flown in from Switzerland and California. Their expertise in managing high-profile marriages sought as desperately as any medical intervention. Marriage retreats at exclusive spas offered programs designed specifically for ultra-high net worth couples facing unique pressures. But insiders consistently reported that the tension followed them everywhere, an unmistakable electricity that neither candle-lit dinners overlooking mountain vistas nor discreet mediation sessions with relationship counselors could extinguish. The fundamental incompatibility had crystallized beyond repair. The psychological profiles commissioned by both sides revealed the depth of their misalignment. Lauren's assessment described a woman driven by visibility and recognition, someone who had built her identity around public achievement and social influence. Jeff's evaluation painted a picture of calculated control, a man who viewed every relationship through the lens of strategic advantage and risk mitigation. These weren't personality differences that could be smoothed over with compromise. They represented fundamentally opposed worldviews about autonomy, partnership, and the role of wealth in defining personal identity. Meanwhile, the tabloid industrial complex dissected every development with forensic intensity that would have impressed criminal investigators. Fashion magazines that had once celebrated Lauren's daring style choices and trend-setting wardrobe began reframing her as a cautionary tale of unchecked excess and misplaced priorities. Business publications worried aloud about Bezos's ability to maintain focus on his various enterprises while managing personal turbulence. Could marital discord shake investor confidence in Amazon's future growth trajectory? Might it affect Blue Origin's ability to secure additional government contracts worth billions? Would the Washington Post, still struggling to find its identity under Bezos' ownership, suffer from editorial uncertainty if personal chaos consumed its owner's attention? These concerns weren't entirely unfounded speculation. Market analysts began noting subtle but measurable correlations between Amazon stock fluctuations and negative headlines about the couple's relationship status. Trading algorithms, programmed to detect sentiment shifts through news analysis, began incorporating relationship drama into their decision-making processes. For a company built on investor confidence in visionary leadership and long-term strategic thinking, even perception could carry a multi-billion-dollar price tag. Institutional investors quietly inquired about succession planning and governance structures, concerned that personal instability might compromise business judgment. The international implications grew more complex as governments reassessed their partnerships with Bezos-affiliated enterprises. Space agencies in Europe and Asia began developing contingency plans should Blue Origin face leadership disruption. Climate change initiatives tied to the Earth Fund saw their timelines extended as bureaucrats hedged against potential funding interruptions. Philanthropy circles grew equally nervous about potential disruption to major commitments. Would joint pledges made by Bezos and Sanchez survive a marital implosion? The $10 billion Bezos Earth Fund, designed to combat climate change through innovative solutions and large-scale environmental restoration, suddenly seemed vulnerable to the instability of its founder's personal life. International partnerships tied to Blue Origin's space exploration missions faced similar uncertainty. Government officials in multiple countries had invested significant political capital in collaborations with Bezos's aerospace venture, betting on the stability and continuity of his leadership. What had begun as a disagreement over personal spending limits now sent tendrils of concern through corporate valuations, social alliances, environmental initiatives, and international space policy. The envelope's contents had metastasized into something far more consequential than either party had initially anticipated. For Lauren, however, the real wound remained deeply personal rather than financial or strategic. Friends described her as feeling fundamentally trapped in a gilded cage where her every movement was subject to approval from committees of advisors and financial managers who had never earned the right to judge her choices. The restrictions weren't about affordability. Bezos could have funded her lifestyle for centuries without noticing the expense. They were about autonomy, respect, and the power to make decisions about her own existence. And in her world, where perception shaped reality more than actual facts, having transactions declined or purchases questioned sent unmistakable signals to the same exclusive boutiques, elite social circles, and professional networks she had cultivated for decades. The psychological toll became evident in ways that transcended mere inconvenience. Lauren's sleep patterns disrupted, her social confidence wavered, and her usually vibrant public persona grew noticeably subdued. Friends reported seeing her stare at her phone for long minutes, as if calculating the reputational cost of every potential purchase or social engagement. The security cameras had captured more than a moment of marital discord that night. They had documented the precise instant when private conflict became public catastrophe, when personal boundaries became corporate liability, and when love at the pinnacle of wealth revealed its true price in terms of power, control, and the ultimate cost of saying no to the richest man on earth. In those 23 seconds of footage, later leaked to tabloids for an undisclosed sum by a disgruntled employee who disappeared to an undisclosed location with a new identity, Lauren Sanchez walked away from more than a marriage. She walked toward a legal and media firestorm that would ultimately reshape public understanding of wealth, power dynamics, and the hidden costs of relationships at the very pinnacle of global influence. The envelope's contents would eventually be leaked, dissected by legal experts, and debated in courtrooms spanning 3 continents. But long before formal proceedings began, its deeper message had already been received and understood by observers worldwide. In the kingdom of billions, even queens serve at the pleasure of their kings. And some queens, as the world was about to discover, refused to serve at all.